Would people even recognize her if they saw her on the street? I mean, she is unrecognizable. This is Coachella versus throwing down in the McDonald's parking lot at 3 a.m.
If you guys have been following any of Trisha's or H3's content lately, then you've probably seen that Trisha Paytas has been beefing with Ethan and Klein for about the last year. And in this video, I'm going to be telling you all the ups and downs that have taken place in their relationship and how they went from completely hating each other to being practically in-laws in basically a few months. Hey, what's up everyone? I'm Mackenzie Smith, and today on IO, I'm going to be filling you in on all the tea that's gone down between Trisha and the Kleins. And spoiler alert, it's been a lot. And I actually listen to the H3 podcast pretty frequently, so I listened to a lot of this beef firsthand, and I can't wait to share it with you guys. But before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe below. Also check out our playlist right up there for more news stories just like this one. So the beef between them actually started way back in May of 2019 when Ethan made a viral video called Instagram versus Reality. And the intention behind it was to make young girls feel better about themselves by showing the rampant editing that takes place on Instagram. But one of the targets of that video was Trisha, who is known to edit her photos quite a bit. Ethan called Trisha, quote, the spokesperson for Instagram versus Reality, and criticized her for the insane amount of touching up in her photos, adding, quote, why are you even a model if you're gonna modify your look so much? It's like beauty queen to WWF wrestler in 2 seconds. You cannot Photoshop your heart and soul, people, remember that. And I'm not even gonna lie to you, the video is pretty funny if you haven't seen it already. And Trisha didn't like this, obviously, and in typical Trisha style, clapped back at Ethan in a ton of tweets, saying that his recent video is harmful to young girls and that the bullying she faced back when she was a kid made her want to take her life. She also posted a kitchen floor video called H3 is harming young girls, where she begged him to take the video down. But he defended the video, saying that he just wanted to show the reality of Instagram versus what people look like in real life and the photoshopping that takes place. Then only a few days later, she said she wanted to come on his podcast so they could hash it all out in person. Then complimenting him in some tweets as well, calling him and the podcast really funny. Then a few months went by where nothing really happened, but Ethan then briefly mentioned Trisha on another podcast. Then Trisha called him out again on Twitter asking, why do you repeatedly come for me? You're a dad now. Maybe like stop picking on girls online for literally no reason. Then even telling Ela that she should divorce Ethan because he's a bad influence on their child. Then a few months later, Trisha came out as trans, and a lot of people in the LGBT community were mad about this, saying that Trisha was making a joke out of a very serious thing. After the intense backlash, Trisha ended up apologizing. But Ethan took this opportunity to poke a little fun at her, like he's known for doing on his channel, with him posting a parody of her apology video, with him fully in character wearing the blonde wig, the red lipstick, as well as filming the video on his kitchen floor, because literally, like, how else can you make a video mocking Trisha and not incorporate a kitchen floor somehow? While impersonating Trisha's voice, Ethan said, quote, I wanted to basically apologize to Trisha Paytas, who's such a sweet, genuine person. I wanted to first of all apologize by saying that she looked like she was at an open casket funeral. She was the corpse inside of a casket. You're so beautiful, you're such a queen. And I don't know exactly what that means, but it's definitely very shady. But then in a crazy turn of events that no one was really expecting, Trisha decided to finally come on the H3 podcast. And honestly, it was a really funny episode, with Ethan spending most of the time calling out Trisha on her bullshit, and the rest with Trisha cracking jokes at her own expense. And it was really interesting to watch because it really didn't seem like these two people had just been in beef for months, and they seemed like genuine friends. The only moment that Trisha was clearly not happy was when Ethan called her out for having ads in her video where she announced that she was trans. But Trisha ended up denying making any money. But then Ethan kept pushing her so hard on the fact that he saw ads on the video that she later admitted that she did make $8,000 from that one video, but she laughed that off too. With Ethan even tweeting out after the podcast that he was glad she came on, and he had a lot of fun with her in the studio, which is also a little foreshadowing, but we'll get into that later. Then they started being really friendly on social media, so Trisha came back on the podcast to have a bachelorette-style dating show so they could find Trisha a man. But after the filming of the Bachelorette show was halted due to COVID, the Kleins were shocked to see that Trisha was posting photos with one of the men from the dating show, Gila's brother Moses. So to clarify all that, Trisha started dating Gila's brother Moses, which is firstly just, really awkward for everyone, and secondly that annoyed them because it was ruining the content they were going to use, for the Bachelorette show. With Ethan responding to a tweet Trisha made with Moses saying, quote, stop this right now. I'm not really mad, just confused and wondering what the actual F is going on, which you know, we literally all were at that point. Like, what a turn of events. Then after a lot of bickering between the couple and Trisha online, Trisha ended up posting a distraught video on her kitchen floor called H3 Ruined My Relationship. And in the video, she looked brokenhearted, saying that her and Moses had an amazing connection and it ended because of Ethan and Hila getting involved. Also adding that she found out about the breakup on the podcast, which is, you know, really that's true. But after only a couple of weeks, she posted a video on her channel of her and Moses eating Korean cheese. So they were essentially back together at this point. The Kleins reacted on the podcast, saying that, quote, they couldn't believe what the situation had turned into. And honestly, like, same with all of us. I was just like watching all this and like just pure confusion. They clarified they had no issues with it, but it was just very confusing, especially because they had no idea Trisha and Moses were even talking again. Trisha then uploaded a video called The Biggest Lies Plus Hypocrisy of H3H3 Yet, soon after the podcast aired on April 25th. And for the highlights, she claimed that Ethan wanted to sleep with her in part of the video. And obviously after all that, they went through another really rough patch. However, now it seems that Trisha and H3 might be in each other's good graces once again, because from Trisha's socials, it's abundantly clear that her and Moses are now in a relationship. This new union seems to have mended the issues between Trisha and the Kleins, with them being such good friends at this point that Trisha and Ethan have actually just launched a podcast together. Like, what? Yeah, seriously, like in the strangest turn of events yet, they're making a podcast together on Ethan's channel, with the first podcast being called Frenemies, and like I really can't describe a better word for them. The first podcast actually seemed pretty good, like they were mainly talking about their rough relationship, and then they went into detail about Trisha and Moses. But as you know, if you've watched this video, it's probably only a matter of time before they get in yet another fight. So we will all have to wait and see how long, you know, that podcast lasts.
I really need to leave.
Okay, all right, we're done. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
YouTuber Trisha Paytas has decided to quit their hosting duties for the Frenemies podcast that they co-hosted with H3H3's Ethan Klein. Apparently, the entire blow-up and heated conversation that led to their departure from the show was all about money. But before we dive into that, make sure you tap that subscribe button if you haven't already, because we are so close to hitting 2 million subscribers. Now, with that out of the way, let's just get right to it. This quite honestly was like watching a couple break up for the millionth time. You can hear in their voice and in their language how many times Trisha and Ethan have had this conversation regarding control over the Frenemies podcast. Although first let's back things up a bit. Back in May of 2019, Ethan sparked an online feud with Trisha after criticizing them for photoshopping their body in a video. Paytas obviously is not one to stay quiet when it comes to criticism and immediately hit back, calling Ethan out. Eventually in October of 2019, Ethan invited Trisha on to talk about the problems that they had with each other. After that initial meeting, the two began to podcast together once a week for a new show that they called Frenemies, aptly named. However, 39 episodes later, and this is the second time that Trisha has walked off and quit the podcast. The first time they quit the podcast was on episode 13 when Ethan mentioned that his wife didn't want to be mentioned on the podcast. Oddly enough, this fight also took place when an employee for the podcast went out to get some pizza, which is why we saw Ethan commenting that this most recent walk-off was due to the pizza curse. However, during the most recent debacle, Paytas was arguing that they didn't get enough input into the podcast. Everything from who they hired to what costumes they decided to wear for the show was all picked out by Ethan, according to Trisha. In Trisha's eyes, the Frenemies podcast originally was supposed to be something that they were going to split the decisions on 50-50. In addition to that, things got even more heated when Ethan mentioned that he purchased a new studio in downtown LA for the H3H3 podcast. This then led to arguments on the cost of production and ultimately how much Trisha felt that she deserved from the podcast. Ethan insisted that her cut of the show's profits were a more than generous deal and that 5% of the Clips podcast was going towards production costs. In a series of some deleted tweets following news breaking out about Trisha quitting yet again, Ethan said, "At the end of the day, Frenemies was a beautiful experiment that I will always cherish. I've learned and grown so much from the experience and have Trisha to thank for that. She's been a dear friend of mine throughout and I'll always be grateful for all she's done for us," adding, "I reached out to Trisha an hour ago saying that I wasn't happy with how she handled this and how unfair it was, and instead of talking to me and handling it privately, she put out another 20-minute video that caused my crew to get so much hate they are now privating their instas," which is absolutely deplorable. If you are reaching out to the crew and hating on them, then you are the lowest of the low. Trisha should have 100% handled this privately. If they felt a way about it during the podcast, write it down, and then say, we'll talk about that later, let's move on. Because the fans don't really need to hear these conversations. It literally adds nothing to the show. All it did was stir up a bunch of hate from Ethan's fans towards Trisha, and from Trisha's fans towards Ethan. So unnecessary and could have all been avoided if they both just didn't feed into it. Because this does go both ways. Ethan could have equally said, let's talk about this later, but he kept feeding into it because he knows that it will get clipped for more content. In another deleted tweet, Ethan also touched on how much of a stake that Trisha had in the podcast. He said, while Trisha keeps complaining about money, every single cent I've ever made from Frenemies is tied up in Frenemies merch that doesn't come out for another month, of which she will get 50% of the profits, even though it was all paid for, designed by, and produced by the H3H3 team. On Trisha's video explaining the situation, she also left a comment pinned that reads, "Hey guys, I see a lot of your comments and you think I'm making a mistake or being unreasonable. I hear you and I'm not here to combat that. I'm leaving to ease the tension everywhere. I don't want to be the toxicity in their machine, and I can feel that I am, and it's not good for anyone involved. I'm sorry so many of you are disappointed in me, or that you only became a fan of me again through the show, but I cannot continue. If this makes me look selfish or a brat, so be it. I am grateful for the opportunity, but it is just not good for me mentally anymore. And it could be my own brain attacking me, but for myself right now, I just need to disengage completely. This is without a doubt the hardest decision I've ever made, and it definitely was the most successful thing I've ever been a part of, so it's with a super heavy heart that I cannot continue. I'm so sorry from the bottom of my heart. I don't know what else to say or how to convey what I'm going through right now without making things worse, and I'm clearly terrible at explaining my emotions and thoughts right now. Again, I'm sorry to disappoint, and that's all I can say." Many fans were disappointed by the news of the podcast coming to an end, but honestly, it's probably for the best.
One was upset. It's because she said that she wanted to fire everybody and get a new staff. That made people uncomfortable. Like, okay, well, she doesn't even want to be around.
Ethan is a piece of garbage that, like, I swear on my life, like, before this started, I was like, damn, I lost a really good friend, but you are such a liar. It's so up to—
Yes, the drama continues. Trisha Paytas is now accusing Ethan Klein of lying about what was said behind the scenes. After Trisha quit the podcast and made several videos explaining the situation, Ethan posted a video responding to their sudden exit from the show. I'm gonna get into all the details in just a moment, but first, if you could do us a big favor and please tap that like button, we'd really appreciate it. And with that out of the way, let's begin. It is still wild to me that these two were able to make it to 39 episodes and only break up 3 times in that process. This unlikely pairing though and merging of audiences truly became a surprisingly successful podcast. They often played games and dressed up as characters, all while discussing that week's biggest drama. Although just recently an intense conversation on the podcast about production costs, creative control, and hiring staff members put the brakes on their success. After posting a video saying that they would be quitting the show, Ethan said that he was gutted by the whole situation. Shortly after, Trisha replied and apologized to Ethan, saying they felt embarrassed by everything that went down. In the tweet, Trisha says, "I apologize to Ethan, Dan, Ian, and Sam. Like, I really do. It's embarrassing and I'm embarrassed. And most of all, you guys. Like, it was cool AF to be back in a popular group for just being me. Like, love and positivity always feels good, and this right now does not. I'm sorry." Now, despite this apology to Ethan and the staff, Trisha also uploaded a series of videos titled Ethan's Lies. On those videos, Trisha reacts to Ethan's comments on the situation and tries to clear up things from their end. Paytas starts their video by saying, "I can only share the truth. I can only speak my truth. I'm embarrassed, I'm upset, I regret a lot of that past 48 hours, but if there's just blatant lies, I have to just go through it." Now, at one point in Ethan's video, he claimed that Trisha actually wanted to fire all of the staff for Frenemies and get new people, although that was a lie. Trisha explained that this never actually happened, adding that just because they had issues with certain people or didn't vibe with them didn't mean that you should fire and replace them. So that's Ethan's own way of manipulating the situation to make Trisha out to be the villain. I've actually started to notice this trend with Ethan a lot, and I thought that we should maybe talk about it. For some reason, Ethan will just straight up lie about a situation when there's a conflict to either, I don't know, get sympathy or perhaps laughs. I genuinely don't know what his reasoning would be to lie about this other than to get his fans to attack Trisha for leaving the show. Another person noticed this and pointed it out, saying, "The discrepancy is not whether or not Ethan agreed to a producer, it's that Ethan thought that Trisha wanted the rest of the crew gone, and expressed this to them without clarifying with her to learn that that's actually never what she was asking for." And in response to that, Trisha actually confirmed this along with a text message exchange with Ethan and said, "Exactly, why is he going between all of us? When I see them, he is manipulating so so much and I'm not sure why. Like, why tell them I wanted them fired when that wasn't the case? Why tell me the idea I shot down with Sam's when it wasn't? He admitted he lied about that. Why? And I'll tell you why. It's because the further that he can shift blame from himself, the less people will focus on his lies and manipulation. Let's not forget that Ethan knows Trisha has mental health issues and a traumatic past dealing with the vlog squad that they've spoken about many times, only for him to repeatedly do things that would trigger Trisha because he knows it will get his shows tons of views. This recent debacle is just the first of many examples of this. If he was a good friend to her and an honest person, he would have not aired that podcast at all. He would have not told his entire staff that Trisha didn't want to work with them. This is some drama queen behavior coming from Ethan Klein. Now, I'm not saying that Trisha is 100% innocent in this either. From what I could tell, they seem to have a pretty good deal when it came to the podcast. Not having to worry about the cost of production and still getting paid to perform is a huge luxury to have. I've had to do all of the production myself before on my own channel, and I know how much work it can be. So I understand why the crew would be so taken aback by Trisha saying that they didn't like the work that they were putting out. That being said, Ethan telling them that Trisha wanted them all fired is just plain ridiculous. As of now, it's not clear what will happen with the Frenemies podcast, but many fans are hoping that this will just blow over.
If you haven't yet heard, the Frenemies podcast officially came to an end, and both Trisha and Ethan have publicly spoken out about how things went down. As is usually the case, people are split, upset, angry, and understanding as to why things went down the way they did, while a lot of others are still wondering what's going on. Today we'll be going through all the ups and downs of the Frenemies podcast from the very start to the very last episode in hopes of having a better understanding of why things shook out the way they did. Today in I.O., we need to talk about the Frenemies podcast. Smash that like button and let's get right into it. As you know, things are about to get spicy. So when I tell you guys the history here dates back to May 2019, well, over 2 years later, and here we are, as you can imagine, I got a lot to cover. Unfortunately, given that this isn't going to be a 10-episode, hour-long episodic special produced by Netflix about the rise and fall of the Frenemies podcast, I do apologize in advance if I leave a few things out. If you guys wanted like an in-depth look at everything, maybe we'll make a playlist for you with all the videos we've done regarding this. That being said, I'll definitely go through all that happened, and let's just say this truthfully, does feel like a high school relationship with all the ups and downs, the insults, the tweets, the apologies, back and forths, only for it to ultimately end up in the same place where it started. But let's go to the start. When Ethan made a video called Instagram versus Reality, specifically calling out influencers and YouTubers and referring to Trisha as the spokesperson for Instagram versus Reality. It's not secret Trisha edits their photos, but it's a fairly common practice online. Still, Ethan went in saying, I quote, "Why are you even a model if you're going to modify your looks that much? It's like beauty queen to WWF wrestler in 2 seconds. You cannot Photoshop your heart and soul. Remember that." Obviously, Trisha responded as they took to YouTube and Twitter calling Ethan a bully, among other things which I can't say. After calling Ethan out for not only bullying them, but potentially being harmful to a younger audience as well, Trisha said in their video, I quote, "It just made me so sad and upset that there's this 40-year-old man shaming girls. He would take my one photo where I was glam for Instagram and compare it to a video like this or a vlog video where I have no makeup on. It wasn't the same day, it was completely different looks." Then Trisha got Ethan's wife and the mother of his children, Klein, involved, tweeting out, I quote, "I would divorce him ASAP as he is causing so much damage to young women. It's actually sickening. I've never been more disgusted. That you stand by him is even more disgusting." Ethan responded on Twitter with, I quote, "Who is this rude person? I don't recognize her from her profile picture. Anyone know?" Clearly these two were the best of friends. And this is when the first podcast would begin, with Trisha asking to be a guest on the H3H3 podcast just 2 days later. Talk about a turn of events. This all went down in May of 2019. Then in August 2019, Paytas randomly tweeted at Ethan for him to stop coming for them, assuming Ethan made a comment in a video about Trisha in passing. When Trisha posted their video in October 2019 titled "I am transgender, female to male," well, it didn't sit too well with many people, especially the LGBTQ+ community. Klein called it effing insane, and this led to Trisha apparently sending some photos to Ethan, which he would then say were gross. Trisha would also make a video saying Klein was worse than Donald Trump. This seemed to be an ongoing back and forth, as Trisha would post an apology video in regards to her transgender video after facing a significant amount of backlash. Ethan from H3H3 saw this as a great opportunity to mock Trisha, which is exactly what he did, making a parody apology of his own. In the video, Klein says, I quote, "I wanted to basically apologize to Trisha Paytas, who is such a sweet, genuine person. I wanted to, first of all, apologize for saying that she looked like she was at an open casket funeral. She was the corpse inside of a casket. You're so beautiful, you're such a queen." This was at a time before Trisha came out as non-binary. In October 2019, the idea of them doing another podcast together appeared to gain traction on Twitter, with Trisha saying they'd want $18 million and Ethan telling them they'd do it for free. And then Trisha was yet again on the H3H3 podcast, and it seemed like the group actually enjoyed each other's company. It was strange given the apparent tension we'd seen in their tweets and videos, but H3 and Trisha actually looked like they were just vibing, bro. And we all love ourselves a good vibe, right? After the podcast, Ethan thanked Trisha and said it was fun having them in the studio. That's interesting. It seems something was cooking, as Trisha would then appear in a Bachelorette-styled episode of the H3 podcast, where the two hosts were trying to find Trisha a partner in February of 2020. One of the contestants was actually Hila's brother, Moses Hackman, and oddly enough, that's who Trisha appeared interested in. The rules were simple. Ideally, Trisha wouldn't message the contestants off camera, but if they did, Klein had to know about it. As we know, in March 2020, the pandemic hit numerous countries very hard, and this led to shutdowns of anything and everything. H3 productions were included, but Trisha apparently broke the rules of their game and was in contact with one of the contestants from the Bachelorette show without Ethan knowing. To add insult to injury, the contestant Trisha was not only speaking with, but apparently was seeing, was Ethan's brother-in-law, Moses. Trisha took to their socials, posting photos of themselves with Moses, captioned social distancing together. A few days later, Trisha would tweet at Ethan, "At the end, I won the Bachelorette. Thank you at H3 Productions." In response, Ethan would admit he's not mad, just very confused about the entire situation at hand. When speaking on the podcast, both Ethan and Hila admitted they were learning about the relationship through social media as well, given that Hila's brother was dodging all of their questions. It seemed Trisha was actually happy with Moses, and then the drama started when Trisha accused Ethan of deliberately ruining their relationship. Trisha claimed Ethan was trying to get involved, while Ethan accused Trisha of trying to cut Moses off from the family, I quote, like Scientology. This whole idea of Ethan ruining Trisha's relationship would last a few weeks, with Trisha taking to Twitter and making videos in regards to the situation. To no surprise, a lot of the tweets that I've mentioned from both parties have been deleted. The videos, which continue to make everyone money, however, they have not been deleted. So that's also something to talk about. It seemed things died down for a couple weeks, then Trisha uploaded a mukbang video with Moses, and H3 made a reaction video shortly after, with Ethan saying, I quote, "This is so effing bizarre. That's my brother-in-law. Hila's brother is now in a Trisha Paytas video doing mukbangs, and I didn't even know. I don't even know that they're hanging out." It seemed over the summer of 2020, Trisha and Moses were able to make things work, and the drama had simmered. Then in September, Drama Alert's Keemstar invited Gabby Hanna onto his show, which is when Hanna would claim she wrote a song for Paytas. Trisha has history with both Hanna and Keem, which shouldn't surprise anyone, because all three of those names tend to get into it quite often with other YouTubers. They just thrive off the drama. Either way, Ethan, Klein, and Keemstar also had an ongoing feud, which appeared to bring Ethan and Trisha closer together. A common enemy, if you will. This then led to Trisha and Ethan announcing the Frenemies podcast in September of 2020. For the next few months, the Frenemies podcast would appear to work quite well. The two had Dr. Drew come on the show, which significantly improved their relationship. But then in December 2020, it seemed things were once again turning sour. 13 episodes in, tensions between Hila and her brother apparently rubbed Trisha the wrong way, which led to Trisha saying they hated Hila, storming off and leaving many wondering if the podcast would continue. Trisha then made a video explaining why they quit the Frenemies podcast, and a week later, the show was back on air, with Trisha and Ethan side by side yet again. Trisha would apologize for the meltdown, and Ethan would explain, I quote, "My opinion really is that I'm always willing to make it work, and there's nothing you could say or do, or you could say and storm out or whatever it is that's going to make me abandon you." In December 2020, Trisha would announce their engagement to Moses, and Ethan would congratulate the two. To start off 2021, Ethan would side with Trisha, who would find themselves involved in a feud with Shane Dawson and Jeffree Star. For a while, things appeared to be going well, and then in June 2021, Trisha announced yet again the Frenemies podcast was done. Prior to the video, the two hosts would have an on-air disagreement about the production crew's payments and contributions to the show. In their video, Trisha claimed the show was ending due to disputes over money, among other things. They made it clear it wasn't about the on-air dispute, but that Trisha wanted a 50-50 partnership, and Ethan wanted to pay them solely as talent, while Ethan did the rest of the production side. Taking to Twitter, Ethan would tweet, I quote, "I am honestly gutted over this whole thing. Trisha's video this morning was a total surprise to me. I don't really know what more I could say or do. I'm very sorry to all the fans of Frenemies. I know how much it meant to everyone. I did everything I humanly could to save it." Paytas then made another video and would take to Twitter explaining it wasn't about money, but more so having a say and input about the show's direction. Klein would go on to tweet that the crew members of the production were starting to receive hate, and that is when things had crossed the line. Referring to Trisha's video, Ethan said, I quote, "Instead of talking to me and handling it privately, they put out another 20-minute video that caused my crew to get so much hate, they are now privating their Instas." Trisha said they were not trying to incite hate and had no issues with the H3 crew, but that Ethan was trying to manipulate the situation, explaining they shouldn't have been discussing money on camera in the first place. Trisha also said they too were receiving hateful messages. Trisha then started to post screenshots of messages between the two, one in which Trisha actually exposed herself for making a pretty wild comment, which I would love to speak more on, but I'm not going to. Just, I don't know, it goes to show the kind of person Trisha is. Anyways, Klein would end up deleting all his tweets, saying he was going to take a step back. I quote, "At the end of the day, Frenemies was a beautiful experiment that I will always cherish. I've learned and grown so much from the experience and have Trisha to thank for that. She's been a dear friend of mine throughout and I'll always be grateful for all she's done for us." And guess what happened next, guys? Truly a shocker here. Trisha would make another apology video, talking about how embarrassed they are. Ain't that something? Explaining how they don't want any drama with anyone on the internet, Trisha apologized to the crew and said although they were sad to leave, all good things must come to an end. Trisha uploaded another video titled "I'm Sorry," in which they yet again apologized to Ethan, referring to the time that they said they hated Gila and said it was the lowest point of their lives. Trisha also said they never fully recovered from that point and they'll be trying to stay offline for a while. Ethan then made a video speaking on the situation. In the video, he said he wanted to clear up any confusion. I quote, "And so I say with peace and love that as a friend, I have come to love and appreciate Trisha. As a partner, I think they are one of the funniest people I've ever known, one of the most talented people, one of the most dynamic and entertaining people I've ever known. So creating Frenemies with them is going to be one of the all-time highlights for me. It's been such an amazing ride. I've learned and grown so much from it on a personal level from them and from you guys, the audience." Trisha wasn't done, as they would upload 2 more videos titled "Ethan Lies Part 1 and Part 2. Which, I mean, didn't they finish their last video with they'd be staying offline for a while? Anyway, Trisha would claim Ethan was lying and manipulating the situation. It seems most of Klein's videos spoke on the investment costs and how any money made from Frenemies would be put back into the production. Trisha argued this both on Twitter and in a YouTube video. In their 6th video regarding the entire situation, and I believe 3rd video just a couple days after they said they'd be taking a break, Trisha uploaded a video titled "This Needs to Be Said." Oh, what could it be? In the video, Trisha made it clear they didn't want anyone from the H3H3 production to lose their job, and that they were leaving to be respectful to the crew. Even though it appeared the decision to leave was made prior to the whole situation involving the crew, Trisha explained, I quote, "Me leaving the show is me showing respect for them. I don't want to be this person that people walk on eggshells and feel disrespected. I don't want to be that person. That's all I was saying by leaving the show." Trisha also said they could no longer trust Klein, and I quote, "None of this feels good. It all feels really crappy. I'm appreciative of everyone who worked on the show. I am." Ethan hasn't spoken on the situation since June 9th when he tweeted 2 days ago. And that's all there is to it, at least as of now. Should any updates occur, we'll let you guys know.
As many of you know, the Frenemies podcast came to an end on June 8th, but when you have big personalities like Trisha Paytas involved in your project, you know the drama will continue. Recently, Trisha released another video alleging that Ethan had repeatedly brought up Trisha's past SA incident many times during the podcast. Although at this point, Trisha has already lost all support, and now it seems like they are just trying to manipulate the fans that they have left. I'm gonna get into all those details in just a moment, but first, if you could do us a big favor and please tap that like button, we'd really appreciate it. And with that out of the way, let's begin. This is some of the most self-destructive behavior that we have ever witnessed. For Trisha to keep going at something that should have been handled offline is just baffling to me. Yesterday they put out a tweet saying, "My video today is not monetized. I included a trigger warning because I'm talking about super sensitive topics." In the video, Trisha tried to give more insight into what went down with Ethan. However, the main focus of the video was about their own SA. Trisha alleged that Ethan repeatedly brought up past SA incidents during the Frenemies podcast, despite asking for him to stop. Trisha also revealed that Ethan had gone to their mother to ask about these SA incidents while they were on a trip together. That being said, in the same breath, Trisha also said that they failed to set boundaries on the podcast, which is most likely why we see this awful back and forth of being okay with one thing and then immediately regretting it later. Trisha would often allow uncomfortable content to be posted for the purpose of entertainment and then later regret doing so. Hours after the video went up, Ethan tweeted out, "I know y'all want me to talk about Trisha, but this whole thing is extremely upsetting and disturbing. I'm still processing it. This is a person who I considered one of my closest friends a week ago who is now making videos accusing me of sexual harassing her. It's too much." Adding, "Trisha said I was sexualizing her in the workplace, which is the textbook definition of sexual harassment." He mainly added that reply because the video itself was not actually accusing Ethan of doing anything to Trisha, but rather continually mentioning their past trauma, which he still considers to be sexual harassment. Now, this is where the manipulation comes in again though from Trisha. They tweeted shortly after Ethan's response saying, "I assure you Ethan did not watch my video inciting more unwarranted hate towards me. I don't even know what to do at this point. I take responsibility for wrongs that I did on the show, but I'm allowed to speak on what made me uncomfortable regarding my sexual health and history." Later adding, "I'm not sure if twisting everything I say this week is intentional to drive more hate my way or not, but it's disheartening. Starting with me wanting to fire a crew to now accusations of sexual harassment when it's me talking about my sexual health and history." Essentially, it doesn't seem like Trisha is going to stop this madness anytime soon. They have clarified in more tweets that an apology to Ethan will not be coming and that a lot of things have happened behind closed doors. As for the people calling Trisha out for problematic behavior, they have asked for haters to unfollow them because they have every right to speak on social media. Which is correct, but does that mean that it's the right thing to do at a time like this? Probably not. All Trisha is doing is making it much more difficult to dig their way out of this. Instead of just going radio silent and dealing with everything in private, Trisha has repeatedly tried to take the angle that all of these things that they once approved for content is now Ethan being evil. At first, I really wanted to hear Trisha out because the court of public opinion can be just so brutal, and knowing that Trisha has mental health issues, I just felt terrible. However, that sympathy manipulated my emotions into thinking that Ethan truly was this gaslighting clout chaser who is getting Trisha to say crazy things on camera for views. Because views equal cash, it's easy to go down that route of thinking. However, now with Trisha trying to clickbait her audience into thinking that Ethan would do something as heinous as SA is way too far. Now, that's not to say that they haven't gone too far in the past with this drama, but for me personally, this was a breaking point. With Gila being pregnant and H3H3 moving studios, the last thing that they need is this extra drama in their life, and you can really see it on their expressions. If I were to give any advice, it would be for Ethan to literally never mention Trisha's name again and to handle everything from here on out offline. It's like we forget that that's even an option. The fans do not want to hear about money or ownership issues on the podcast. That is not entertainment, and it should have been handled offline. But hey, it already happened, so hopefully moving forward, Ethan will learn how unstable it can be working with a frenemy. But we would love to hear your thoughts on all of this though, so make sure you drop us a comment down below with what you're thinking. But either way, guys, that has been today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I've been your host, Johnny Rogers, and until next time, stay classy, YouTube, or at least try.